Right, so we are back for more and continuing our talk on community safety and what is wrong and how we can fix it. And joined again by Ian Cameron, continuing our talk on this. Thanks, Ian. So the next question obviously is, how then do we safeguard our community against this mess? How do we mobilize and get them going? How's the structure working?
So Dion, I think it's a crucial question. The interesting thing is many people want to or often overcomplicate it. So they often think that it should be a very difficult structure or that it's going to be complex. But it is a very basic thing to start. But I think as context, one has to imagine an upside down triangle in front of you, with the sharp end, the bottom end of that upside down triangle being the community. And if this thing balances like that, like almost like a pyramid, and the community is in sync, the top two corners of that triangle is law enforcement and private security. And you'd basically call that the golden, or your golden triangle of community safety. If that's the way that you structure it, and private security and law enforcement are in sync with community, what the community wants, with oversight bodies in the community, amongst the community, etc., then you should have a pretty strong crime combating machine in your area. Now, unfortunately, without going into depth about it now, we've said a lot about it already. We know that law enforcement is lacking in many areas. So they are especially lacking when it comes to intelligence, even just information, never mind intelligence. They don't, in many cases, even have the capability to process information in order for it to become intelligence that can then be used in proactive operations. So what we encourage, and I think it fits in nicely with a lot of the training we're still going to be talking about, is that communities need to organize themselves. They need to organize themselves into structures that are allowed by legislation, existing legislation, so they are legal. They must have strict discipline among them. And they need to take a stand against crime, firstly, through being visible and being able to communicate. So I think if we stand still with communication first, and we'll get to private security later, in terms of the community, it can be as simple as checking in on a WhatsApp group every day, saying that my street is okay, and that some of the people that might have retired that live in my street are keeping an eye, and that they will communicate any suspicious behavior by someone, so that they can be eyes and ears of the good law enforcement and even then private security in those specific areas. Now, something as simple as that could be a really big deterrent for criminals in an area. You don't need a gun in hand. You don't necessarily need any weapon in hand. The fact that you are communicating effectively and showing that you're very aware of your surroundings, what's happening in your community, and that you're communicating it effectively, plays a major role in how you can safeguard or better the safety of your community. Now, we saw with the riots in KZN in 2021, we saw many communities taking a stand where law enforcement failed completely. In fact, in many cases, they didn't just fail, they didn't even show up. They didn't even get a chance to fail. And communities took a stand, and it was incredible to see that where many communities literally blocked roads and said, but you're not moving into our residential area, they didn't face any issues, any problems in terms of looting or destruction, just because of the visible signal of a community that is willing to take a stand and that are willingly and powerfully communicating with each other, being aware of their surroundings, etc. So that communication part, I think, is critical, because you can do patrols and walk the walk, but if you're not communicating, it just doesn't work. So I think that's the first thing. We need to structure decent communication systems in these communities. I think if we take a little bit further, and this is when it comes to official structures, it's important that we encourage people to get involved with their local neighborhood watches, farm watches, and community policing forums. Now, for the past 11 years, I worked with many of these different types of structures, and it's true that unfortunately many of them face so much local almost scrutiny because of politics between each other. So that's something I can't do anything about, and that you can't do anything about. But we can encourage people to say that you need to stop with the politics, because at the end of the day, that is going to cause your demise. You need to make sure that that you're focused on combating crime, that you've got a clean cut direction that you're moving into, that you've got specific points or core business that you focus on, and you're not going to get taken off target. Now, I want to mention something. In the past, we worked on a project called Project Nehemia, with retired General Roland de Vries, and he described it very, very nicely. He said Nehemiah was trying to build this wall to protect his community, and he basically had a sword in the one hand and he had a shovel in the other, and whilst he was building, he also had to defend. And I think that picture is crucial, because so many supposed wise men and others tried to take his attention off what he was doing. But he said, no, I'm focusing on my core business. I'm focusing on defending and building. And that's what I want to do. And that sent out a very strong message. So I think that's the next part. Encourage people to get involved in those structures. And the one does not need to report to the other. There's no reason why structures that are autonomous cannot work together very nicely. You don't need to report to a CPF if you're a neighborhood watch, but you can work together very well, and both have very important functions in a community. And then the last point, and then I'll summarize it. And then the last point is to really get training. And I mean, we're still going to talk about the training in a bit more depth, but training in terms of what do you do in certain situations? How do you handle yourself in certain situations? If you were to arrive at a crime scene, and in the majority of cases, it is the community that arrives first, what do you do then? How do you cordon it off? How do you make sure that, for example, evidence isn't contaminated in any way before forensic services get there? And what do you do if you should be faced by a suspect? What can you do? What are you allowed to do? And what can you expect after taking action? All of those types of scenarios need to be thought of. I think the challenge, and we'll talk about the detailed training later. I think the challenge that we often have in South Africa is that violence between people in terms of crime has been romanticized by many people. So we often hear comments around a braai or at a social gathering of, if I find someone in my house, I'll just shoot him, etc. But there's nothing good about that situation. It's not something to romanticize. We rather want to stay away from the violence if we can. We rather want to make sure that we don't have contact with the criminal if possible. But should the day come that there is contact between you and the criminal, then you want to be prepared to be able to handle it. So in summary, firstly, communication in the community is key. After that, you can start being more visible with your neighborhood watch or community policing forum, or both, whether through patrols, static patrols, observation posts, community operations with police and private security, etc. And then the third thing is to be trained. If you carry a firearm every day, then know how to use that firearm. It's a big responsibility. Know what the consequences could be should you not handle yourself in the correct manner. All of those types of scenarios are the things you need to think of. So again, communication, official, well-disciplined structures, and good training.
Right. Ian, is there a sort of a consulting service that you guys offer for communities? They can consult you and help them with the structuring of this?
Absolutely. So in terms of Action Society, If anyone should need advice or just support, we provide it digitally to them. In some cases, we can even visit. We're actually testing a few models at the moment in some of the worst gang-ridden areas in the country where there's severe violence, which is a discussion for another day. But absolutely. So I would encourage people to contact Action Society on an email address called communitysafety@actionsociety.co.za.
Right, we'll have those descriptions in the link, as well as the descriptions to the articles that we refer to all the time. So please have a look there, and please get in touch. Let's solve this problem together. Get a solution that works for us. Ian, thanks so much.
Thank you, Dion.